This is a reading of The Interior Castle by Saint Teresa of Avila, Chapter 1. Now, if we think carefully over this, sisters, the soul of the righteous man is nothing but a paradise, in which, as God tells us, he takes his delight. For what do you think a room will be like, which is the delight of a king so mighty, so wise, so pure, and so full of all that is good? I can find nothing with which to compare the great beauty of a soul and its great capacity. In fact, however acute our intellects may be, they will no more be able to attain to her comprehension of this than to an understanding of God. For he himself says, "He created us in his image and likeness." Now, if this is so, and it is, there is no point in our fatiguing ourselves by attempting to comprehend the beauty of this castle. For though it is his creature, and therefore as much difference between it and God as between creature and creator, the very fact that His Majesty says it is made in His image means that we can hardly form any conception of the soul's great dignity and beauty. It is no small pity, and should cause us no little shame, that through our own fault we do not understand ourselves or know who we are. Would it not be a sign of great ignorance, my daughters, if a person were asked who he was and could not say and had no idea who his father or his mother was, or from what country he came? Though that is great stupidity, our own is incomparably greater if we make no attempt to discover what we are and only know that we are living in these bodies and have a vague idea because we have heard it and because our faith tells us so, that we possess souls. As to what good qualities there may be in our souls, or who dwells within them, or how precious they are, those are things which we seldom consider, and so we trouble little about carefully preserving the soul's beauty. All our interest is centered in the rough setting of the diamond and in the outer wall of the castle, that is to say, in these bodies of ours. Let us now imagine that our soul, which I have described as a castle, contains many mansions, and some above, others below, others at each side, and in the center and midst of them, all is the chiefest mansion, where the most secret things pass between God and the soul. You must think over this comparison very carefully. Perhaps God will be pleased to use it to show you something of the favors which He is pleased to grant to souls, and of the differences between them, so far as I have understood this to be possible. For there are so many of them that nobody can possibly understand them all, much less anyone as stupid as I. If the Lord grants you these favors, it will be a great consolation to you to know that such things are possible. And if you never receive any, you can still praise His great goodness. For as it does us no harm to think of the things laid up for us in heaven, and the joys of the blessed, but rather makes us rejoice and strive to attain those joys ourselves. Just so it will do us no harm to find that it is possible in this our exile for so great a God to commune with such malodorous worms, and to love him for his great goodness and boundless mercy. I am sure that anyone who finds it harmful to realize that it is possible for God to grant such favors during this our exile must be greatly lacking in humility and in love of his neighbor. For otherwise, how could we help rejoicing that God could grant these favors to one of our brethren, when this in no way hinders him from granting them to ourselves, and that his majesty should bestow an understanding of his greatness upon anyone soever? Sometimes he will do this only to manifest his great power, as he said of the blind man to whom he gave his sight. When the apostles asked him if he was suffering for his own sins or for the sins of his parents, he grants these favors then, not because those who receive them are holier than those who do not, but in order that his greatness may be made known, as we see in the case of St. Paul and the Magdalene, and in order that we may praise him in his creatures. It may be said that these things seem impossible and that it is better not to scandalize the weak. But less harm is done by their disbelieving us than by our failing to edify those to whom God grants these favors, and who will rejoice and will awaken others to a fresh love of him who grants such mercies, according to the greatness of his power and majesty. In any case, I know that none to whom I am speaking will run into this danger, because they all know and believe that God grants still greater proofs of his love. I am sure that if any one of you does not believe this, she will never learn it by experience. For God's will is that no bounds should be set to his works. Never do such a thing then, sisters, if the Lord does not lead you by this road. Now, let us return to our beautiful and delightful castle and see how we can enter it. I seem rather to be talking nonsense, for if this castle is in the soul, there can be clearly no reason of our entering it. For we ourselves are the castle, and it would be absurd to tell someone to enter a room when he was in it already. But you must understand that there are many ways of being in a place. Many souls remain in the outer court of the castle, which is the place occupied by the guards. They are not interested in entering it, and have no idea what there is in that beautiful place, or who dwells in it, or even how many rooms it has. We will have read certain books on prayer which advise the soul to enter within itself, and that is exactly what this means. A short time ago, I was told by a very learned man that souls without prayers are like people whose bodies or limbs are paralyzed. They possess feet and hands, but they cannot control them. In the same way, there are souls so infirm and so accustomed to busying themselves with outside affairs that nothing can be done for them, and it seems as though they are incapable of entering within themselves at all. So accustomed have they grown to living all the time with the reptiles and other creatures to be found in the outer court of the castle, they have almost become like them. And although by nature they are so richly endowed as to have the power of holding converse with none other than God Himself, there is nothing that can be done for them. Unless they strive to realize their miserable condition and to remedy it, they will be turned into pillars of salt for not looking within themselves, just as Lot's wife was because she looked back. As far as I can understand, the door of entry into this castle is prayer and meditation. I do not say mental prayer rather than vocal. For if it is prayer at all, it must be accompanied by meditation. If a person does not think whom he is addressing and what he is asking for, and who it is that is asking, and of whom he is asking it, I do not consider that he is praying at all, even though he may be constantly moving his lips. True, it is sometimes possible to pray without paying heed to these things, but that is only because they have been taught about previously. If a man is in the habit of speaking to God's majesty as he would speak to his slave, and never wonders if he is expressing himself properly, but merely uttering the words that comes to his lips, because he has learned them by heart through constant repetition, I do not call that prayer at all, and God grant no Christian may ever speak to him so. At any rate, sisters, I hope in God that none of you will, for we are accustomed here to talk about interior matters, and that is a good way of keeping oneself from falling into such animal-like habits. Let us say no more then of these paralyzed souls, who, unless the Lord Himself comes and commands them to rise, are like the man who had lain beside the pool for 30 years. They are unfortunate creatures and live in great peril. Let us rather think of certain other souls who do eventually enter the castle. These are very much absorbed in worldly affairs, but their desires are good. Sometimes, though infrequently, they command themselves to our Lord, and they think about the state of their souls, though not very carefully. Full of 1,000 preoccupations as they are, they pray only a few times a month, and as a rule, they are thinking all the time of their preoccupations, for they are very much attached to them, and where their treasure is, there is their heart also. From time to time, however, they shake their minds free of them, and it is a great thing that they should know themselves well enough to realize that they are not going the right way to reach the castle door. Eventually, they enter the first rooms on the lowest floor, but so many reptiles get in with them that they are unable to appreciate the beauty of the castle or to find any peace within it. Still, they have done a good deal by entering at all. You will think this is beside the point, daughters, since by the goodness of the Lord, you are not one of this. But you must be patient, for there is no other way in which I can explain to you some ideas I have had about certain interior matters concerning prayer. May it please the Lord to enable me to say something about them. For to explain to you what I should like is very difficult unless you have had personal experience. And anyone with such experience, as you will see, cannot help touching upon subjects which, please God, shall by His mercy never concern us.